Hello everyone. So today I'll be talking about pizza box computer cases, and these type of computer cases basically defined how computers looked like back in the 1980s to the early 1990s. So basically the way it's set up is the monitors on the top, and on top of the case, and then you have a keyboard. So that's basically how it looks like. So it's kind of today we have tower computers, and some computers are all-in-one computers. You just have a monitor and all the components for the computer, like the motherboard. If there's an optical disc, the optical disc is in there as well, and the hard drive, and everything that makes it a computer is in the monitor, right? But back in the 1980s and early 1990s, we didn't have that. All we had was a case on top of, so the computer was on your desk, and it was basically it was on your desk. It was like flat rectangular piece, and it was on, and you put the monitor on the top, so it basically took up a lot more desk space. And then you had a keyboard, so everything was right in front of you. And before this, we had all-in-one. Everything was in a keyboard. The motherboard was in a keyboard. The floppy disk was in a keyboard. I don't think they had hard drives in keyboards, so it was just a computer and a keyboard, computer keyboard, floppy disk setup basically. And that's how computers look like, and you can see many examples of it, countless examples of computers from the 1980s that look like, that use pizza box cases, and they all look pretty much the same. You have a large CRT monitor on top of it. You got the floppy disk. It could be a 5 1/4 inch or a 3 1/2 inch, and inside of it you have the power supply. You have the hard drive, if they had hard drives. So probably every computer built after 1988 started to have hard drives, so they all had hard drives after that. And so it's basically like a tower, but it's laying flat on the table. So that's basically how it looks like. But now we just have computer towers basically, and that's probably the only thing that really changed for computers, is the way that they were, is the case design. And from the case design we went to the tower computer. That became like the standard around probably the mid 1990s. So basically, towers became the standard, and they're still the standard today for most desktops. But a lot of people don't use desktops like they used to today, because most people use smartphones as computers. They use tablets as computers. They use laptops as computers, stuff like that. There's probably a lot more laptops out there than there are desktop computers or tower computers. So the defining theme of computers back in the I would say the mid 1980s. That's when the pizza box computers started to become a popular format for computers. even for the Amiga, when they came out with the Amiga, I think 2000. I think that was a I think that was a desktop with a pizza box on it. But the Macintosh was also the same kind of format, except um, it was a one piece thing. You had the monitor and the box, the computer case, as one piece. So it's basically the same thing, except for the PC and PC compatible market, the monitor was detached from the case basically, which I think is a much better design than the Mac design, because if the monitor, CRT monitor, went out, you would have to get it serviced by Apple to get that CRT monitor repaired. But for the pizza box design, if the monitor failed, you could just throw out that monitor and buy a new one and put it in there, and it was as simple as that. And same with the keyboard. Before they had the keyboard computer combination, if you had a problem with the keyboard, you had to repair the keyboard, and repairing keyboard is not a very easy thing to do. And with the pizza box format, the keyboard and the mouse and the HDIs, or human interface devices, like the keyboard and the mouse, and some people had trackballs back then. That kind of like became disposable items, you know. And even though mice back in the 1980s were quite expensive, it would cost anywhere from maybe $150 to $250 for a mouse. And depending on the mouse that you used, if you used a bus mouse, you would have to get a card with that, and that would probably cost close to $200 or something. It's quite expensive. And that was back in 1980s dollars, which is a lot more than the dollars that you have today, because the money back then had more value than it has now, you know, compared to now. And yeah, for the basically the keyboard computer combination, you had other problems. I mean, if you wanted to take out the floppy drive, if the floppy drive went bad, then it would be very hard to like remove it, because it was just built right into the keyboard. But with the pizza box format, you could just swap out the floppy disk and put a new one in. It was as easy as that. So yeah, so you had various types of computer manufacturers that made these pizza box computers, like IBM. You had the IBM PS2, you had the AST Premium desktops, you had the compact computers, you had Tandy's, Zeus. That was a very popular brand back in the 1980s, and there were so many. And there were a lot of clone manufacturers as well that just produced so many different IBM PC clones, you know. They were a lot less expensive than the brand name computers. And you had a lot of different names. Even Commodore was going into the IBM PC market. You had companies like Hyundai, Samsung. You had I think even General Electric even, and you had Sony. They were in it. There's so many companies in the going into the computer desktop industry back then. And you had Zenith. I think you even had RCA computers, and yeah, that was the place to be for technology back in the or computer technology back in the 1980s to early 1990s. And that was pretty much how things were. And then you were starting to see like tower computers starting from, I guess, the late 1980s. You began to see towers from like Dell computers. Zeus even had them. A lot of different companies started coming out with towers, and those were like for the higher end computers, like the 386 DX series and the 486 DX series of computers. They came in like tower formats, and for other computers like 286s, 386s, 386SXs, and you had 486SX, and those were like pizza box formats. But you also had 486DX computers in pizza box formats as well. But that gradually began to get phased out in favor of desktop towers, because the reason for it is these pizza box formats take up too much desk space. So for a tower computer, you could just put it underneath the table, right? Which saves desk space. You've got a lot more desk space to work with. And computers were getting like larger and larger, as they came out with more powerful processors. So you had very small pizza box computers on desks, right? And then they started to get larger and larger. And I guess the tower is a better format in that aspect, because you don't have to have, you could have more room on your table, and that's important when you're in the office, right? You're also dealing with paperwork and stuff like that. So I guess that's why it was gradually phased out, because it was basically a better design. And I think the keyboard computer format was also a good design, but the only problem with that is, like I said, computers started to get more complicated, and they began to get bigger. The motherboards and everything began to get bigger, and they required like better cooling solutions, like heat sinks and stuff, and fans. You couldn't put all that into a keyboard, so they came out with a pizza box to remedy those problems, right? And in addition to that, it had replaceable parts, which made it easier for technicians to work on, right? So probably for something like a keyboard, motherboard based computer, everything was just integrated on there. But you are beginning to see kind of like a semi-resurgence of keyboard computer type of computers for ARM-based computers like Raspberry Pi 400s and stuff like that. That's something that's becoming a resurgence. But the thing is, for those type of computers, it's possible because the motherboard for those computers and the CPUs and everything are relatively small, and everything is pretty much integrated onto the board. But for x64 based computers, that's a lot more difficult to do, because everything on those computers are bigger. You need a bigger graphics card. The graphics card is huge, and in many ways it costs more than the CPU and everything. That's probably the most expensive part of the computer for a modern computer. And for people who want to use computers for like serious things like AutoCAD, computer-aided drawing, people who want to do modeling and stuff like that, for 3D applications, like people who do art, like 3D art, they probably need a powerful computer. And for video editing, you'll need a powerful computer for that. And that's why it's been like that. But for a lot of other designs, they really haven't changed. The laser printer from back in the 1990s to the laser printers that are produced now are probably very similar in the way they're formatted, right? That's changed very little. And the mouse from 1988 is the format of it is the same as a mouse of a modern day mouse, except the mouse from the 1980s or 1990s used a ball or something, and the modern day mouse uses lasers, right? So that's changed about it. And universal power supplies haven't changed very much in the way they looked from 1988 to the way that they look now, except probably UPSs were much bigger back then compared to the UPSs now, but you still have the same format. That's changed very little. So that's pretty much it. Okay, thanks for watching. By Ace 1000KS 1975 signing out.